plants. The green frontier. These are the discussions of the podcast Horticult. Its continuing mission to talk about strange new cultivars, to seek out new flowers and plant them, to boldly garden like no one has before. Hey everybody, this is Blaine from the Horticult. How y'all doing? So this episode is number 41. We're calling it Fall Bulbs for Spring. We go over a bunch of different fall bulbs. We talk about changeouts. We talk about groups of bulbs. There are some that are deer resistant. There's some that are spreading. And then we go into some unusual bulbs. Then we get into some Utah natives that you can use in your landscape. So there we go. Let's get it on. I'm Blaine.
And I am B-Rad.
And this is the Horticult. Thank you, Podlings, for tuning in for this episode. And we're going to get in after it. This one is spring bulbs. So we're getting into the fall. Oh, fall bulbs. Same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
we're
you want to plant them in the fall for the spring.
Yeah, so spring bulbs in the fall.
The spring beauty. We want the
if you want pretty spring flowers, you got to think ahead. And we're thinking about the fall. And we are in September.
Yeah.
So we're kind of creeping into the fall season. This is the time you got to be thinking about your bulbs. I actually bought some. I'm very proud of myself. I actually have bulbs this year. But you go on, bro.
Well, so why do we have to be thinking ahead? Like, I don't get that, you know.
You don't at all?
Okay.
I know you do.
So the only thing I can think of is the ground is frozen in early spring.
This is true.
Late winter, early spring, and so to go out there with a chisel and break that permafrost does not sound appealing to me. So, yeah, I mean, as you remember, at Marinda, we had this great fall change-out. Yeah.
We started, I think we kind of
finished. End of September.
We finished at the end of October, so it took us a month.
Yeah.
To rip all the summer stuff, summer annuals. Well, what we planted as summer annuals. Some of them were perennial, but switching over from summer and then putting in the bulbs, and then topping them off with pansies, and I think we used some other stuff too, like
some English
poppies.
Daisies, and we may have
something that overwintered. We put in some kale,
ornamental kale,
Iceland poppy.
Oh yeah,
Iceland
poppies.
So yeah, that's what we used to overtop the bulbs. But man, that was a process, man.
It's a lot of work, yeah. And it is the time to do a change out if you're looking for the spring, you know. Thinking about how the soil is so penetrable. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, fall bulbs. And what are the flowers, the spring flowers, the bulbs that you're familiar with?
Well, you got tulips, which tulipa, many varieties, many colors, awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
So tulips, daffodils,
crocuses.
Croci.
Yeah. Well, and what they've done now is they've been able to hybridize all of these varieties. So you're used to seeing the daffodil, where it's the size of maybe, I don't know, a few inches across, right? The flower.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got these little tiny dwarf miniature versions of that. Not only the narcissus, but also the tulip. And it gives you a lot more to play with as far as colors, sizes.
That's cool.
Area.
So
some
if you
of
have
them,
a smaller area, you can have a lot more color.
Yeah, little fairy garden, maybe. You can like adequately put the size of flower to the area. So,
and then you get those like football size fritillaria or fritillaria. Damn,
hyacinth.
Hyacinths.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I does.
Hyacinths.
Yes, I do. Yeah, so you can kind of break this up, these fall bulbs, into a few different categories. And what I did is I threw out there just your common stuff, which we just talked about, right? Tulips, daffodils. And within that group, there is potential deer-resistant bulbs. Hyacinth would be one of them, one that deer do not or are less likely to dig up and eat. Hyacinth, and why is that? They're poisonous. I mean, that's why they're itchy, right? If people have allergens and they have allergies to that, then we'd always have them wear gloves,
right,
so that they wouldn't go home and spread the itchiness to their face and whatever else. Anyway,
I was going to say, like, do ornamental onions, are those more deer resistant, like the alliums?
I would say yes. They're more deer resistant, or just they're less likely to get disturbed and munched on.
Those are awesome.
Yeah.
I love those ones.
The fritillaria, the big football size ones, you're saying, that's also in that category. And the thing is that, and I've always been curious about, and I think we've proven that if you plant your beds, your flower beds, with these bulbs, the deer are less likely to rummage through and eat your pansies and ornamental cabbage and things like that. So it is beneficial. It's adventitious to intermingle some of these, the allium, hyacinth, and fritillaria in and amongst your spring flowering beds.
Sweet.
So, yeah, that's kind of a one category that I want to throw out there. Another one is invasive or spreading bulbs. Some people are like, you know what? I want to avoid that happening in my yard.
Grape hyacinths.
Yes. But then there's other people that are like, oh, that's absolutely what I need for this sprawling area or berm that I need to, cover with some plants, really easy and inexpensively. Grape hyacinths.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Crocus is another one. We brought that up, but crocus is another one that will spread and self-divide, I guess is the term. And so that little tiny corm or bulb will over time will divide itself, and the best way to propagate that is to simply just go in there and then you take clumps or portions of that mound and replant it. And so you can gain a lot more square footage like that. But that's another great spreading one. And then in the category of tulips, they do not self-divide very well. And that's why a lot of the time you see the tulips are purchased every single year to go into display gardens, right? When you think about Thanksgiving Point, and of course Miranda, and then also the Temple Square. I mean, if you're going to repurchase any of these fall bulbs, it's much better to do your tulips, because they will be so much more robust, and you're going to get the largest head out of your flower the first year after it's been planted. Subsequent years thereafter, either it will not come up for whatever reason, maybe poor drainage and it dies, it rots out, whatever, or the bulbs will be much, much smaller and lack like vigor and color. But I'm bringing this up because there is one tulip series or cultivar that is a spreading type of tulip. It's the Darwin series. How can you forget that, right? That name. It's like, yeah, okay, Darwin. Darwin tulips will indeed, and they're a much smaller tulip, and the bulb is much, much smaller than your typical like monstrosity Holland tulip,
Yeah.
Anyway, they're a little bit smaller, still just super cool, and they will proliferate, especially if you dig them up and replant them. Anyway, so
cool.
That's kind of a cool category to consider there.
Yeah, I mean, one other reason why you should plant in the fall, other than it being frozen and cold and miserable, is it gives the bulb time to kind of acclimate to being planted again, and it needs a cold period. You can actually grow them all year round in greenhouses because they push or free, like the production of tulips, how they're able to be cut flowers. And they only use them once because that's what we were saying. You only get that one time. Hydroponic bulbs with tulips, I mean, that's a whole industry. And they push them, they cut them, they toss them because that's when they're going to get the biggest thing. But they can trick them by getting them in a cold area. And then they bring them out. They keep them in there for the period that they're supposed to be in there, bring them out, grow them, and then they can cut them. So it's like they manipulate the bulb's natural tendencies to come through a cold period to bloom and able to have it, the product year round. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
I don't know if it's able to do it here in Utah, but I do know they do it elsewhere as a production thing. They've got to do it around here somewhere. Somebody.
Yeah, I've always heard that the bulb has got to go through that vernalizing in order to trigger.
You even know the scientific term.
Well, it's yeah. But here's the thing too.
Yeah.
By planting it in the fall and then adding a little bit of your bone meal, right?
Yeah.
Giving it a little bit of that fertilizer, it will then, as it's underground, that bulb's underground, it's establishing its root system while the top portion of the bulb stays dormant, or mostly dormant. But the root system is quite active, probably at least for a month and a half after planting, maybe more, depending on how cold it actually gets. So,
cool.
Establish the root system. The root system is are the feet. It's the foundation of that plant. So when it shoots that spike up, that stem in the spring, and all the leaves, it's going to be kind of a little bit top heavy, relatively top heavy, and it has to have a good anchor down into that soil. Otherwise, you get one. I've seen snowstorms come flying in here with daffodils in full bloom, and just flatten those puppies right to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And within days afterwards, you get some sunny days afterwards, the snow somewhat melts, daffodils just come right back up.
So just for us here, for the listeners in Utah, like I've never actually gone to the Tulip Festival at Thanksgiving Point, but I hear it's amazing. I've just never got around to doing it because it's such a short window. But there's that one you can go to for, southern, I guess, from Salt Lake, south of Salt Lake people, the Utah County people. And then in Salt Lake, they have the Daffodil Festival at the Red Butte Gardens. So they focus more on daffodils because they're more dry tolerant. So that's their whole thing.
And one thing I had noticed too is that the daffodils were less likely to be disturbed by deer. And that, I just remember that was
because there's deer everywhere
every year.
Up there.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. But and deer, I'm sure, are down into Thanksgiving Point as well, but just not as in numbers, quite a lot less.
Yeah, they have big gates and keep things out where Red Buttes kind of open up to the canyon, so we get everything down in there.
Definitely.
But it's so hard. Pluses and minuses to both. But man, one of the major pluses of tulips is the colors. Holy cow. Just the complete different varieties of color you can get out of the tulipa, the tulips.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can get virtually every color out of it, whereas your daffodils, you're White limited, whites.
Yeah, white
yellows,
and yellow.
Pinks.
Is there